vendors had expectations. And so a big challenge we've had is waiting for vendors to catch up to the market. So we may be ready, but the vendors aren't ready to meet the market.
Our motto is buy without regrets. And so
if you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something.
Buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
You think about, right, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyer's agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrader, investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyer's agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. Super excited to be doing probably my favourite part of Australia today. In the studio today with Celina Gregory. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Chris. How are you?
So people are thinking, where is the favourite place? It is probably the south coast of New South Wales. Not to say I've been to all of Australia, but it's a place that I do love to go to. I've sort of got married down there. I just gravitate to that part of the world, and I'm going to be there in a few weeks over the school holidays to sort of visit the Southern Highlands and sort of the berry sort of area, you know, the Gerringongs and the Giroas and, you know, even in the Kangaroo Valleys, there's just so much going on in that part of the world. And, you know, we saw a massive element of tree changes all through, you know, pre-COVID, in COVID, post-COVID. And so it's such a wide area, and there's just so many elements to it. So super excited to be doing this episode today. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. I mean, obviously, you know, we know each other, but I mean, if you think about the, you know, your experience when you became a buyer's agent, but also when you got into the real estate industry, you've been doing it a long time. Can you sort of share your journey today?
Yeah, sure. So I entered the industry in 2007, so nearly the 20-year anniversary. Might need to do something to celebrate. Someone said it should probably be a holiday, but I was thinking a cake or balloons or something. But a long time ago now. So when I was actually a producer at the time, but I loved property, and I actually sold my first property myself in Woollahra in Sydney, and I loved it. And I was always just very drawn to property and real estate. So I was looking for something different. I'd been in the film industry for a long time and the advertising industry. And so I did my training at REI, which is, you know, where you went in those days. There weren't many other options. And I remember the trainer saying, who here wants to be a buyer's agent? And we all sort of looked at each other thinking, what's a buyer's agent? And he said, mark my words, in 10 years it'll be huge. So you should all consider it. And I never forgot that. So that was when I started, 2007. I first worked in sales, actually in the Northern Beaches in Sydney. Worked for a very successful agent there, Gillian McGrath. And I was with her a short time because I then moved on, and I moved to the Southern Highlands. But she instilled some of those really tough things you need to do in real estate, like door knocking and all that sort of stuff, which was horrible. But it was a good grounding, good experience. And yeah, that was my start. And then I moved to the Highlands and continued to work in sales there. And the company I worked for there then became a holiday rental company. So I did a bit of that as well. And then I moved to the South Coast. I actually grew up in Berry. So I moved a bit closer to home after 10 years in the Southern Highlands. And so I worked for Bell Property, 3 different offices, Wollongong, Kiama and Berry. So I did a lot along the coast in sales as well. But I always had that little nagging feeling and remembered that thought about, should think about being a buyer's agent. And I thought about it for many years before I did it, and everyone kept talking me out of it. They said, it's too soon. No one knows what a buyer's agent is. Don't do it. And I nearly did it before COVID. Wish I did. And I walked out of it again. And during COVID, I was a sales agent and I was selling properties that buyers hadn't seen in person. And I thought, this is crazy. You know, we need a really strong buyer's agent in the area. So that's when I decided to set up my own agency and become a buyer's agent. So, and then of course interest rate rises started and the market changed. So my timing wasn't ideal, but you know what they say in real estate, good agents are sort of grown in tough markets, and the ones that survive are the ones that, so that's sort of how I came to become a buyer's agent.
No, you give me a lot to work with there. One part of that, there's a couple of things that I really love is the sort of, growing up there, I think that makes a huge difference. You just know what, areas like, what locals like, what you loved as a kid, what other people, where your friends love, there's definitely something to be sort of said to the best buyers agents of know the area for a long, long time. But also you knew what life was like pre-COVID in the sales world, and what was selling well, what wasn't selling well. And, even the holiday letting experience, how did that sort of help you? Because, it is one of those markets where a lot of the buyers or a lot of properties do have that element to it as well. How's that helped you?
It helps a lot with my clients because I am getting a lot of clients that do consider also renting out their property in that way to make a bit of extra income. So they still want to use it as a weekender, but they'd like to earn a bit of income as well. So I can educate them a bit around that and reality check them a bit as well, because people see the nightly rates on holiday rentals and think, wow, these people are making a fortune. There are actually a lot of expenses as well. It's not, it's not as, it may not be what you think from the outset. So I can just help them, help educate my clients a bit around that.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a belief that, exactly, I can just sort of buy this and rent it whenever I want, and that'll just sort of, and there's rules around that are changing with the ATO and obviously negative gearing, etc. But, there is a sort of a reality check. Sometimes you're not as some are super hot for rentals, and then some are going to really struggle unless it's like peak times. Obviously the Southern Highlands as well, and Berry. I mean, how do you think about the sort of different buyer pools that have, in 2026, that are moving there, and why they're moving there, and or why they're upgrading there, or why they, want to stay there? What's driving those markets in today's terms versus, say, COVID and even pre-COVID?
I mean, they've both been really popular areas, for tree changes for many years. I mean, my parents were an example of that. They moved to Berry over 50 years ago. I mean, they were pretty early on, but, it has always been popular for people to look for more space, look for, better value for money and that sort of thing. And that has certainly stood the test of time. So you certainly have families looking for better value, looking for more, for their money. And that goes for both areas, the South Coast and the Southern Highlands. You also still have, affluent buyers who are looking for a weekender. They're looking for a beautiful acreage that they can enjoy on weekends. So they still live in Sydney, but they're looking for that escape. So it's a bit of a combination of the high net worth buyers who are looking for a weekender, and then also younger families that are looking for better value. So I don't think the type of buyer has changed that much over the years. It's probably been, both of those types of buyers for quite some time. I mean, obviously COVID is another story. It went crazy. And everyone just wanted to get out of the cities and work, they were able to work from home from a much larger property, perhaps more space. So that's, a different kettle of fish, I guess. But generally, I think it's been the same type of buyer. Wow. Yeah.
Do you find that the actual, just the also, maybe not the family moving there, there may be also the sort of the pre-retiree/retiree that's sort of sold up in the city, and they're, that, like you said, doing that tree change. I think a lot of them want to sell in a good market though, right? Like, so it's almost like as the Sydney market goes up, they're like, oh, I can cash in now for a really good price. So they're sort of, but they're not going to sell it till they can get that really good price. Do you find that that's slowed down a bit over the last few years because they've been a little bit apprehensive to sell and make that change?
Yeah, look, it's, and yes, to the, the retirees and the pre-retirees, definitely, we have that type of buyer in both areas and have done for some time. I absolutely agree with that. Lately, yes, it's been tough. I mean, my niche is the lifestyle property market, and that niche kind of has been struggling in recent years. After COVID, a lot of people pulled back, and once the interest rates started going up, those buyers, really reduced. So they're still there, but the numbers are nowhere near where they were. And whether that's because they're waiting to sell, like you say, or not, I think it's become a bit of a luxury having that second or third property. Even though a lot of my buyers might be cash buyers, so they're not necessarily affected by those rate rises. It just took the confidence out of the market. And, it became a bit of a luxury to have those holiday homes. And yeah, so there's definitely been a reduction in that in recent years.
Yeah, I think Kiama, when we even were thinking about moving there all the way back in 2017, we were pretty keen. And, it was just sort of the reality check of kids coming and, work. Could we make it happen back then? And I think we've had a very good life if we did move there. I'm not saying we sort of, but I think it had the biggest growth. If you look at the last 5 years or something, how's it sort of, when you look at the better pricing, as you're looking at properties, yes, they might be feeling like they don't want to sell in Sydney, but really, are they getting a lot, better prices? Are you finding it's, if some sellers do want to get rid of their second home or they're maybe moving back to the city, is it really good buying for you in 26 versus other years, or is it still really hard to find the good stuff?
No, look, it's definitely a buyer's market in our area, and it has been for a few years. There's a lot of stock. So in fact, I'm finding my clients are, before I help them, of course, getting a bit of analysis paralysis. They really just don't know what to do. And I feel like recently I've had more inquiry, and I think it's because during uncertain times, people perhaps need even more guidance because, there's just so many options, so many things to consider. We've had plenty of stock. We've had plenty of options. So it hasn't really been a problem for people to find. If it's a problem for them, it's more so that they just can't decide because there are so many options. And I know it's quite different in Sydney. So as a buyer's agent, it's very different operating in this area compared to, say, a Sydney buyer's agent. I think they'd be shocked to know how things are here, quite different. We have different challenges to Sydney buyer's agents. I think their challenge is finding the stock. Our challenge is, educating buyers and ensuring them it's a good idea to use a buyer's agent and helping them actually decide and commit. Yeah, so it's sort of a bit flipped compared to Sydney.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've got a proper buyer's market, right? Choice, and then you've got the ability to negotiate, right? Because you've got choice. So how do you help them really, understand those markets and to, figure out it's the right property for them, and also it's the right property that is actually a good investment for them, and, and helping them weigh up different areas, like, what are some of the common mistakes that you sort of help them avoid? Maybe it's buying in something a bit hard to get in and out, or too far away from the shops, or it's maybe a bit too close away from the beach, or, what are some of the decision sort of frameworks you have to take them through?
Yeah. So there's a bit there. And also just getting back to your other point about post-COVID, that's really affected us in that vendors had expectations, based on COVID prices. And so a big challenge we've had is waiting for vendors to catch up to the market. So we may be ready, but the vendors aren't ready to meet the market. So, yeah, just to finish that last point, that's been a challenge. In terms of helping buyers, make those decisions, it's so important. It's all part of the onboarding process as well. I go through quite a rigorous process. It's not rigorous for them, but just in terms of a thorough process, making sure I'm really clear and they're really clear on what they want. Having said that, I do like to throw in some wild cards because, as you may know, people often purchase something that's different to what they initially said they wanted. So it's good to keep an open mind, but, it's important to consider so many things, but access is a big one. People sometimes don't think about the dirt roads and how that will be and whether they will get sick of that and creeks that might flood and, those sort of access problems. So reality checking them around that sort of thing, as you said, sort of how far they are from the shops, what sort of a community they want to be part of, all the different areas in the Highlands and the South Coast, they all kind of have their own personalities. So we really dig deep into all of that sort of thing because, to work out what is the right fit for them. I find particularly in the Highlands, different suburbs can really have a very different towns, villages have a very different feel from one another. So it's helpful for me to have discussions with clients, around their interests and, so I can help them find their people, because that is, my clients are looking for a lifestyle, and that's actually what I love about my job. It's not just buying them a property or a house, it's really helping them create the lifestyle they want. So it's really looking at all that type of thing, as well as the practical elements, of course. And I mean, we, of course, look at growth and, what the value of property is. And, of course, make sure we do all of that proper due diligence and give them, reports that show, everything they need to know in that respect. But clients, because they're not investor clients, they're not, the numbers are not the most important thing to them. Is really about the lifestyle. So that's what we have to sort of spend the most time on, is really making sure it's the right fit for them, as well as all the practicalities, yeah.
Where do they sort of often go wrong, though? Like, you think about her lifestyle, but I mean, you mentioned around the road and maybe not the right people around them, and it's not really the community, or, do they get sort of sometimes surprised? Maybe it doesn't rent as well on holiday, or maybe there's just too much upkeep, or maybe it's just they don't visit it as much as they think they're going to, or it's too much, they buy something too big that's, or they get rules around like rezoning or something. Like, so where's some of the common things that, they often get really excited about a property and you're like, oh, just slow down a bit. You didn't know about this, this and this.
Look, you've just listed a lot of them, to be honest, but, buying a rural property can be work, and that is something that people need to consider. Obviously, I've got a lot of referrals and people that I can help, help them in that respect, but that obviously costs money. But, they do need to think about all of those things. There are people that decide to move to the country and then they find that they just don't come here enough, or have a holiday house, let's say. They just don't come here as much as they think they will. And that's something you can't really predict. I mean, you can definitely discuss things beforehand and try to work out what's important to them. But, sometimes it's not something you can predict. But, it's a matter of, talking about all those practical things that we've mentioned. You just rattled off all the main ones. But
is the schooling sort of, do they sometimes get issues with childcare? I've noticed a lot of people have had issues in like Central Coast, for example, or, the younger, maybe the older sort of crew, maybe they don't have as many challenges as like not us, but sometimes the practicalities of families to move down there are a lot more challenging, do you find? And,
times, a lot of people that move down, they have family or friends here, and that can be part of the reason they move. So they might already have a bit of a network. I know clients with older children, teenagers, are sometimes concerned because they just want to be with their friends every weekend. So that's they often consider. Childcare itself, yes, I mean, there's sometimes wait lists and things like that, but generally people tend to find options if they're coming to the young family. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that needs to be considered. But I tend to find it's the older teenagers that, they just want to stay in Sydney with their friends. So that's something that
they sometimes find it hard to actually, even though they want to make this shift and they're like, oh, we want to move here when they finish school. The teenagers are not up for it, and they've got a pretty voice in the household. Where, obviously you're a sales agent there, so you would know a lot, aged workday firms, or, they all know each other, right? So how does that help you? I mean, have you seen an issue with, I don't know, like other parts of Australia had a lot of influx of new buyers agents, Sydney buyers agents buying on the South Coast. Like, have you seen any issues like this pop up?
Yeah, look, I don't mean to criticise Sydney buyers agents. They're brilliant for Sydney, but I really don't understand why some clients still use a Sydney buyers agent to buy in a regional or rural area, because there are nuances with rural property, and a big part of using a buyers agent is for the local knowledge. And, even if they go and get their stock and station licence or whatever, they still don't have that local knowledge. So it really doesn't make sense. I get that they might have a relationship, but I don't think it's the wisest decision on their part.
Do you see many investor buyers agents? Like, they're ones that we want something a bit cheaper. They couldn't afford Sydney. So they, often they would go to Central Coast, Wollongong, but then they started to go a bit further than that and they started to go into different parts of the South Coast, or did you not really see too much of that?
Yeah, look, I mean, there are some people that advertise for South Coast or Southern Highlands and they aren't here. And some of them are those types of buyers agents that, work with investors. So, yeah, I see a bit of that. And in terms of, to answer your other question, working with having been a sales agent, that's just such a huge benefit because, as you would know, negotiating with an agent that you know how they operate, they know you, they trust you, makes a massive difference. A lot of the agents I'm working with and negotiating with are past colleagues of mine. I've worked at a number of agencies in both the South Coast and Southern Highlands. So that's a huge benefit. That really is very helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's not like you're evaluating everything it's equal. One's 4,000 square meters, one's 6,000. One's on the better part of the flatter part. One's not, unusable land. One's, and the list could go on. So, how does that really help you as well? That real knowledge to help you value the property, know what real comparables are, genuine and the sales history. Because I think you can go so wrong in that area and get stuck with the property, overpay for it, that, the locals know that there's some real issues there, or it's just not really that scarce or that desirable. It's just that you're only looking now and what's on the market is that. Absolutely.
It's a huge thing. And that's something, a real benefit I have is that I can talk to the locals about the property. I might know the neighbour next door, I know the other agents that have appraised it and they'll know what it's really worth. So it's hugely beneficial. And there's a huge risk, yes, with people using a buyer's agent from out of the area of overpaying because they don't have that insight. And, I am very fortunate that I have a strong relationship with local agents and locals in general where, I am able to access information other people would not be able to. And there's a level of trust. Like I operate in a respectful way with agents so that they know I'm not trying to, rip anyone off or anything like that. But, it's all about respect as well to form those relationships and which can be ongoing and lasting.
When you think about the sort of the Berry, Gerringong, Geroa, all these sort of areas, how do you sort of break them down, and do you break them up into pockets like the beach pocket, you want a bit more of a rural pocket? Do you want to go more into the hills or the, something? So how do you think about it when you're guiding the client into the right pocket? How do you then you drill down in that pocket, to find the right one?
Most of my clients are quite well educated, but they often haven't thought of or don't know of little pockets. So, the first thing is I do sometimes have clients that can't decide between the Highlands and the South Coast. So it's great to be able to offer both. And obviously the biggest difference is the access to water on the South Coast. So that's the first thing, narrow down how important that is to them. Because if water is really important to you, the South Coast is the way to go. If you want rural or a village, then you can look at both. So we can discuss both of those options in greater detail, but they generally have a pretty good sense of the rough area they want to be in. And then it's a matter of drilling down and suggesting, I'll often suggest a little pocket people have never heard of. It might be next door to a big name like Berry, let's say, and they've never heard of it. So when they're doing their searches on the portals, they haven't even seen those properties because they're not coming up under Berry. And it might have a slightly different price point. They can save some money and they're still only, 5-10 minutes from Berry. So it's really, I find they generally have they have a rough idea of where they want to be. And then it's a matter of giving them some advice and some insight into those areas and also some other opportunities that are close by.
What's some of the, just out of curiosity, the mystery locations, they might be focusing on Bowral or Mittagong or Moss Vale, but then they haven't thought about Robertson, or I don't know, there's certain pockets where you sort of take them off and they're like, wow, this is nice. So actually, I haven't thought about this. And they always get that sort of, wow factor, and they had never thought about it. And then all of a sudden, it's now become their favorite, like Barrymore or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with the Highlands, there are some gorgeous pockets. There's places like Burrowing, which some people haven't heard of. It's actually the first place I lived in the Highlands. I just fell in love with it. It's just such a picture-perfect little village. So there are places like that people might not know of because they've just been looking up Bowral. Robertson and Bunjanoon are good examples where there's good growth opportunity. They're that further out, but you still get that incredible, Highlands lifestyle. So Bunjanoon's become a lot better known now, and that has had some great growth. But yeah, and there's little pockets like Exeter, and there are certainly, everyone has a different experience in terms of where they know and where they don't. But there are always, there's always somewhere that someone hasn't considered that might be the perfect place. Yeah.
Is there any areas you're sort of really nervous about when clients are saying, I'm just not sure about, I know you love that area, but I'm a bit worried there's going to be a lot more development. I know that's happening a lot around Mossvale, or is there, some pockets that, it's a real challenging area and then the clients just didn't know what they didn't know. Is there certain, you don't have to go too detailed on the area or whatever, but is there, pockets that just make you feel a little bit, what you think you're buying today and what you're going to have tomorrow is a bit different?
Look, we haven't had huge development in these areas so much, so that hasn't been as much of an issue. One thing that sometimes concerns me with clients with the South Coast is if public transport's important to them, because, the last train line is Bomaderry. So, I do have clients that want to buy further south, and, there's some gorgeous areas, Culburra, Kalala, all those areas. But I found this as a sales agent when I worked in Kiama as well, and actually I have some clients at the moment moving to Gerringong from Vincentia because they want to be closer to amenities in the train line. So things like that, important to reality check with clients. So, it's not a huge concern, I guess, but it's something that I just need to check with clients, whether they realize that, there's no public transport, things like that. There's also flood zones, in certain areas that I need to make people aware of, and obviously fire zones, which are many. Yes, so things like that need to make sure clients are really educated and well aware of.
Yeah, it's kind of that narrow pocket, isn't it, once you get past it to sort of, towards Jarvis Bay. But, there's a new sort of turning off point at Jarvis that's happening, and it's getting better, the roads down there. And that was always a bit of a choke point, I guess. But the roads down there are just so much better. If I reflect from 10 years ago versus where they are today, getting out around Wollongong, and I think it's going to get better and better. I think the F6, coming out of Sydney, there's some issues there. But, if that starts to, kick on through, getting down to the South Coast is just, obviously the airport's in the south as well. There's a lot of benefits to, in the distance, while it feels a long way away, it's becoming a nicer commute out of Sydney, I find, to get down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And all those things will help. When I was a kid and my parents would drive from Sydney, we went down the little coastal road. It took forever. So things have really changed. And all of those things, will continue to improve. We still do have some roads that need some work down this way. But yeah, access is becoming easier, which is great. And so
you mentioned the clients, that have gone from Vincentia, I think you said, up to sort of Gerringong. So they're coming a bit closer. So from Jarvis Bay up to, are you finding anyone from the sort of the south of, the north of Wollongong that, it's a bit busy, there's too many Sydney people here now, that they're also trying to escape down the coast a bit further? It's they had it's almost like a little bit of a second order. Their house in Bulli is now worth $2 million, and it was worth $1 million, and now they're like, actually, it's time to get out of here. Is that happening a bit as well?
There's a bit of that. I'm also have people from, the Sutherland Shire.
Sutherland Shire. Yeah.
Yeah, Northern Wollongong. I get quite a few clients from that area because it's easy for them, for a weekender. So more that area. And then, of course, eastern suburbs, north shore of Sydney. Just had some clients from Victoria. Canberra's another popular one for the South Coast, and that's where most of the buyers tend to come from for us. Yeah.
Yeah, Canberra's an interesting one, right? Because it's often forgotten about, but you're right. It's kind of that perfect middle ground, isn't it? Between, Canberra and Sydney. And, if you can afford to get a bit, you can still get to Canberra quite easily if you have to for work. I've found that, particularly around the Bateman Bay sort of, that area, it's a huge driver, isn't it? Of a lot of that Canberra wealth comes to there. If you think about the Shire, the sort of Southern Highlands, is there sort of, when you think about, the longer term sort of, drivers of it, and And how do people sort of best protect themselves? Like, what are the properties that, you find that have just got the biggest buyer pools? Like, what are the things, if you had like a little bit of a checklist of the points that you're always trying to steer clients more towards that, and they might absolutely love the view, but then they've got a really steep block, or, like some of the common mistakes that they might love, but the locals, or that's just not as popular as they think it is.
Accessibility, again, I would say is a big one. Sometimes people like the idea of being more remote, but the reality is that it can be, can get a bit tough. As I mentioned before, sort of flood zones and bushfire hazards, there's things that, it's very romantic to look at these beautiful properties, but, we do need to the realities with some of them and just make sure they're aware how it might affect.
Bushfires is a big one, right? The bushfires, I think we're in El Nino El Nina again. We had a few wet years, right? And now all of a sudden it's going to be the hot ones. And, did you find that sort of bushfires a few years ago, I think it was 22, was it? And, is that sort of impacted the market? Like, it's kind of people forgotten about it now, but is it still very...
Had some
19, wasn't it? Yeah, 19, sorry, yeah.
Very bushfires, yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, you know what it's like. When time passes, people become a bit more, immune to the fear. But when it's fresh, it definitely, it's, I guess, top of mind for people more so. So, yeah, it's just good to, remind people that these things can happen. Yeah, but I'm not really seeing, I just had some clients purchase a beautiful, acreage in Kangaroo Valley, and, needed to point that out to them. But yeah, it's about, it's just making sure you're educated and you're aware of how that can affect as well your insurance and your building requirements, renovations or rebuild and things like that. And, we've sort of touched on it as well, just not being close to things can sometimes, become an issue over time. It just becomes a bit of a drag not being able to pop down to the shop. But some people want that, really it depends on the individual. Some people want to be as far away as they can in any shops. So everyone is so different. That's why it's so important to really drill down with each individual, what's important to them, because everyone's quite different.
So if you think, over the years you get better and better at what you do, and what's some of the things that when the clients get to the end of the journey, they go, oh, I just wasn't expecting that to be what was the most valuable part of your service? When you sort of, I guess getting some feedback from them at the end, like some of the, they thought it would be negotiation, or they thought it would be, finding it, but they sort of at the end go, oh God, that was the most powerful part of what your service you offer. What were some of the things that come to mind?
Look, hopefully we all get better, all the time, because, with every transaction we do, we're learning more about that person or that place, so we're always growing, all of us. In terms of, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Well, it's more just the intangibles. Often they're the things that they value and they don't really see it up front. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of the buyers industry is like, they think it's like this tick the box, I'm going to get X, Y, Z, but it's not. It's like it's a journey, and taking someone through that journey. It might even just be that they actually have to you give them the confidence to actually sign that contract that's in front of them. Like it's so many things, and I think clients just don't understand it often until you've gone through the experience, and at the end they're like, oh, that was amazing, but it wasn't. The feedback isn't what you think it would be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and look, it's been different things. So I'll never forget with one of my first clients, there was a guide and they wanted to offer it at the bottom of the guide. And the agent had said to me, look, if you can just get at this number, I think we can get it over the line, which was actually under the guide. And so I immediately saved them $150,000 because I was able to reassure them that they didn't need to make an offer at that level. So that's one thing. So that client was really happy I saved them lots of money. And that was because of my relationship and intuition with that agent. Times I've had another client say we would have never picked that spot. So that's been another thing. Introducing them to an area, local knowledge comes up all the time. Different things for different people. But and just I think, as you said, just giving them that confidence and having an advocate, having someone on their side, someone backing them that really has their best interests at heart. is a comfort to people. And it's nice because it's a bit scary out there, you know, being up against all these other buyers. So it's really nice for people to feel they've got someone on their side, you know, someone that's really looking out for their best interests.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a huge value because, you know, everyone's going to look at the portal, everyone can go and look at a property, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, what do we do? And you need to talk to someone, right? You get yourself this echo chamber, you and your partner, maybe you're on different opinions as well. One loves it, one doesn't it. And I think sometimes that independent third party, the sounding board there to actually ask the questions and help them get to the decision is that in itself is extremely valuable versus just them constantly never buying, i.e. Just
Counselor and a mediator as well, Chris.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Because there's a lot of that involved. There's a lot of psychology involved. Absolutely. Yeah,
that's right. And it's, you know, it's not tricking them at all. It's just actually helping them make a decision and getting them on the same page. You know, it's all slowing them down if they're too excited or vice versa. So,
yeah, so they make your decisions and absolutely, yeah.
Thanks so much for the chat today. It's such a great part of the world and I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance-related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.